Today on Ulysses for Beginners, we're just going to take a look at the first paragraph of Proteus. We're going to really get into the fine-grained detail. We've never done this in any other chapter. Why am I doing it now? Because Proteus has a lot of challenges, or it scares people off. So if you land a little more softly with my help, maybe you'll keep going. So let's take a look. Ineluctable modality of the visible. The opening sentence, very confusing for most people because there's two words, ineluctable modality, that most people don't use a lot. And even if they do understand it, it's still not completely clear what we're talking about, what's going on. So ineluctable just means you can't escape it, you can't avoid it. Modality has a lot of different meanings, but I'm going to go with the meaning closest to, similar to like one of your senses or organs for apprehending the world, and the visible. So we're talking about the vision and mainly the eye, but we're talking about things besides just the eye because when I hear this sentence, I think about you can close your eyes, but you're still seeing things. You can dream and you're still seeing things. You can be totally blind and you're still seeing maybe darkness, or maybe you're seeing colors. I hear that blind people can see a lot of different things. And even if we're thinking of something, recalling a memory or something, we usually think it and we see something. So there's this almost inescapable connection between vision and thinking. And I think that's what Stephen or Joyce is talking about. At least that, if no more, because you can't really turn off this inner vision, even when your eyes are closed, you're still seeing something. And even though people can say, like, black isn't a color, that is a color. So seeing nothing is seeing something. And I find when I close my eyes that I still see things kind of move, and shadows and light flickers through because your eyelids aren't totally transparent. But this idea, though, that thought and vision are superbly connected, and you can't avoid that. I think that's what Joyce is saying. Signatures of all things I'm here to read. This, according to my footnotes, what you read in the exterior world of forms, and I think this you can connect to Plato, but he's going to be talking more about Aristotle, but I think that as he's talking about, there's this, from the form, there's the original prototype that's untouchable, but then we get these more concrete forms that we can observe and take in through our senses, and I think that's what he's going for there. Signatures of all things I'm here to read. Sea spawn and sea rack. I just learned this. Sea rack is some kind of seaweed or something. The ones that look like little distended hearts or something, like look fruit, sea fruit. I think that's sea rack. Sea spawn, I think that's just little tiny animals. The nearing tide. Remember, we're at Sandy Mount Strand. So these are things that he's observing and taking in. He's observing the signatures of his senses. That rusty boot, snot green. This recalls in the first chapter Telemachus when they talked about the snot green sea. Blue, silver, rust. So these are just the colors that Stephen is observing around him. But notice we haven't even said the word Stephen. We haven't said he. We haven't said, we have said I. So we know that these are things that Stephen is thinking. This is going on inside his head. Limits of the diaphane. The diaphane, the adiaphane. Diaphane means that you can see through it to some degree. Adiaphane means you cannot. Then he was aware of them bodies before of them colored. Not only is this a very awkwardy sounding sentence, but who is he? What are we talking about? And this is I said he was talking about Aristotle, but even though he mentioned Aristotle in the previous chapter, and he'll mention Aristotle later in the book, the name Aristotle does not appear once in this chapter, which is surely confusing for people. But we're talking about Aristotle. Then he was aware of them bodies before of them colored. This idea that you're aware of the color and the general shape of things, the identity of a thing, before you start reading the signature, the details that your senses pick up. How? That's the question that Stephen asks. By knocking his sconce against them. Sure. So Stephen is carrying his ash plant, his walking stick, throughout this chapter. So he can knock just as Aristotle might have done. Go easy. Bald he was, and a millionaire. These are, according to my notes, medieval legends about Aristotle, because Aristotle's significance until the Enlightenment was really, he was one of the hugest forces in Western science, in our understanding of the world, even his inaccuracies, his mistakes. And then it wasn't until later thinkers, Copernicus, Galileo, and so on, started to question some of his ideas and demand more evidence, more of a scientific method rather than Aristotle's method. Maestro di color che sano. And this is Italian. It means master of those that know. And according to the notes, this is from Dante's description of Aristotle in the Inferno. Dante was one of James Joyce's favorite authors, if you didn't know. Limit of the diaphane in. Why in? Diaphane, adiaphane. I think this is just way more detail than most people are going to bother with. It's just something that relates to, again, Aristotle and how forms are perceived. If you can put your 5 fingers through it, it is a gate, if not a door. Shut your eyes and see. He's getting into logic and proofs, and then he goes into the shut your eyes and see, which sounds kind of theoretical or maybe metaphorical, but he actually does shut his eyes. The next sentence in the next paragraph is the first time that we actually get narration outside of Stephen's head, and it says, Stephen closed his eyes to hear his boots crush crackling rack and shells. You are walking through it howsoever. And it switches to second person. Now I'm going to stop there. I just wanted to give you an idea of where this chapter is going to go and how it starts. It's very confusing, sure. And I don't think anybody could understand this without notes and get a really good idea of what's going on. So the people that initially read this in magazine form must have been really confused and had to read it several times to get any sense of it. It's tricky, and Joyce is really challenging his readers, but I hope that my little exegesis just now has helped you to get started, and we're going to get more into the ideas of this chapter in the next video.